great pleasure to be here, and I thank the conference organizers for inviting me. Very exciting to see all these young faces, since you are the future of science. However, I want to give you a somewhat challenging lecture here and make you think maybe a bit beyond the boundaries of what you think about science right now. So I want to start with something very basic, which is what science is and what scientists do. Scientists make discoveries. That sounds obvious. However, we need to think about what a discovery is. So a discovery is something that is an unexpected surprise. Now, that's a very important definition because it tells us that we cannot predict discoveries. There's something that doesn't follow obviously or logically from what we know, because if it did, it wouldn't be a discovery. That is a challenge because it means that everything you know, everything you can learn, will not be sufficient to allow you to make a discovery. You have to know what you don't know in order to make discoveries. So knowledge is a good basis. Knowledge is a good place to start. But determining what your ignorance is just as important. Now let's put this in context. Korean students lead the world in standardized testing in math and science. However, Korea itself does not do nearly as well in measures of innovation in science and technology. One of the questions I always get asked when I'm here by government officials is, why don't we have any Nobel Prize winners coming from Korea? Very, very bright students testing at the top of the scores in the entire world, but where's the innovation? So you're here because all of you succeed. You're very, very good at what you do. You learn very, very well. However, that's not going to be sufficient. It's a basis. It's not enough. You're going to survive as a scientist doing basic research only to the extent that you fail. I want to repeat that. Only to the extent that you fail. 90 to 95% of the experiments a real scientist does fail. If you have only succeeded in your life, you are not prepared for what scientists actually do. And I've seen this. I have seen my brightest students come into the lab, and the first time an experiment fails, they think they did something wrong. My job is to tell them they did something right. Because if you're not failing, you're not learning. If you're not failing, you're not discovering where the boundaries of science are. If you're not failing, you don't know what you don't know. And that's where the basis for scientific discovery starts. So as a scientist, you're only going to succeed through insatiable curiosity, by incessantly asking questions and challenging authority. Because if the authorities and the experts knew the answers, you wouldn't have to make a discovery. We'd already know how nature works. What you have to start with as a scientist is what we don't understand about nature and what none of the experts are yet able to explain or do. So I want you to understand right up front, this is a dangerous message. I am asking you to learn to question authority, to question what you're being taught, to find its limits, and to go beyond it. That's revolutionary. Every scientist is a revolutionary. All right, so you still want to be a scientist? What do you need to do? First thing I can tell you from our research is that grades and test scores are not good predictors of success in science. There are a number of studies done at UCLA and MIT that have shown that straight A students aren't the best scientists. It's often the B students. And the reason for that is because they fail. They fail often, it's difficult, they don't learn easily, but they get used to having to struggle with not always getting everything right. That's a scientific life. Things don't always go right. In fact, usually things don't go right. One Nobel Prize winner once told me the secret to getting a Nobel Prize is making your experiment work. Now again, that sounds really trivial. I'm sure that you've done experiments in your classrooms. You're a good student, they always work. But when you're working at the edge of the unknown, your experiments almost never work. So saying that getting your experiment to work is the key to getting a Nobel Prize is actually very profound, because a good scientist works at the edge of not knowing what they're doing. That's something you have to practice. That means you're going to fail. You're going to fail a lot. So failure is something that almost all good scientists have experienced. One of the reasons that we see this is that good scientists try things that they're not good at. They develop avocations, hobbies. They study things they're not very good at. I took math until I failed. I literally kept taking math classes until I reached the point I couldn't understand the material anymore. I have a D on my record. But you know what? I learned enough to use that mathematics in my work. I'm not going to be a mathematician, but I can use that type of math when I actually do my work. That's all I really needed. Had I not pushed myself, I wouldn't have that skill. So trying until you fail is very important. We have documented that about half of all Nobel Prize winners talk about themselves as not being good students. They were not the top student in their class. They struggled often to get into graduate school. They had problems passing standardized tests. These are not the people you expect to get Nobel Prizes, but that's very important to realize. You don't have to be the best to be successful as a scientist. Where you go to school also doesn't matter. As an undergraduate, if you're not at the best possible school, that doesn't necessarily mean anything for the future. What really counts, we've documented, is access to doing real research. And by real research, I mean getting your hands dirty in a laboratory and finding out what real scientists do on a day-to-day basis. Again, it's teaching you how to deal with failure. Specialization also doesn't predict success. When we look at Nobel Prize winners, we've discovered that the typical Nobel Prize winner has 3 or more degrees in completely different sciences. They work at the intersections between them. The specialists are doing what everybody else is doing. The Nobel Prize winners are combining fields no one has ever combined before. They're working at their intersections where we don't know how those fields go together. So if you want to do the best possible science, get an idiosyncratic training in various different sciences and try to figure out how they fit together. Find problems. Problems are what drive science. What we don't know, can't do, those are the areas that are most important. So as you gather all your knowledge, Use it to think about what hasn't been done yet. And on that score, I have a very specific suggestion. This is something I did when I was developing as a scientist. Most of my colleagues, I find, have done something similar. Read scientific biographies and autobiographies, learn to think like the best scientists in the world, try to understand their idiosyncratic ways of thinking and working on problems, and then try to emulate them. Read popular science literature. Read the latest papers in science and nature. And then try to predict what the next breakthrough is going to be. Try to imagine the next invention that comes out of that information. Most of the time you'll be wrong. Some of the time you'll be right. Most of the time you're going to invent something that somebody else already invented. I do this with my students all the time. And interestingly, as they progress, they get sharper and sharper about figuring out what the latest research is all about. And then after 2 or 3 years, they start making predictions that are completely novel, things I've never thought of, things my colleagues have never thought of. And at that point, they're thinking like real scientists. They're predicting things that no one's seen. They are making inventions no one's thought of before. And all of us who are doing this, do this every day. Try it. Be wrong. It doesn't matter. Form a club where you get together and read the literature and tell each other what your crazy ideas are and then see whether they play out in the scientific literature. Find a mentor who's willing to listen to you and encouraging your attempts and tell you where your thinking isn't so good, but think about it this way instead. That's what will develop you as a scientist. All right, so basically, my message here is that you have a choice. You're all very bright. You're all very successful. That's a great basis. But now you have to decide whether you want to continue doing what makes you successful, always being right, never being wrong, always being the top of your class, always knowing more than everyone else. That's only going to get you so far. Or do you want to go out where there are no experts and try things no one's ever tried and risk failure and actually court failure and learn from your failures? Many years ago, there was a very interesting conference about exactly this topic that took place in the United States. It's a place called the Smithsonian Institution. And at that meeting, one of the participants got up and said, "Here's the way I see it. You can either have the shackles of the palace or the freedom of the shack," by which he meant you can stay where all the money is and where all the awards are and all the accolades, and you can get lots of money doing what other people want you to do, but you're not going to make a breakthrough. Or you can go off and work in a shack where you don't have enough money and everybody thinks you're crazy, but you know you're onto something really important, and you very well may make a great discovery. In fact, many Nobel Prize winners have said they want to be working at the edge of the following conundrum, where half of their colleagues tell you that you're crazy to be working on this problem because it's so high risk and it sounds so crazy. And the other half tell you, you have to do this. This is brilliant. It's going to be a breakthrough. If you're always right, it's not a breakthrough. If you're always wrong, it's not a breakthrough. Somewhere in the middle, you have to do that. So your challenge as a scientist is to understand nature, not to be better than every other student in this room or anywhere else, because nature doesn't care how much you know. Nature hides her secrets, and she hides her secrets from everyone. Your job is to wrinkle those secrets out of nature, and you can only do that by discovering what those secrets are. So my final message to you is be open to surprise, because surprise drives discovery. Thank you.
Okay, first of all, I'm very impressed by the fact that a newspaper company such as Seoul Economic Daily can organize a forum like this, Seoul Forum, as well as Youth Forum, this room, focusing on basic science. This is unbelievable. I cannot possibly imagine a newspaper company can do this. This is an absolutely wonderful idea. I highly appreciate the way they did this. This vice chairman just stepped out. I think he's probably coming in. So let's give a big hand to this Seoul Economic Daily as well as this vice president. Okay, now, my format is somewhat different from previous presentations. Let me start with this slide. Let's see, can I take this out? Okay, good, so this works, beautiful. Okay, now, I have let's see, okay, so I have this sculpture, Anybody recognize who this person is? Raise hand. No, nobody. This famous lady, I'm sure Professor Ruth Bernstein knows about this lady. This lady is, oh, this works. Okay, oh, there we are. Okay, so Nefertiti. You never heard of this lady's name? Nefertiti. Cleopatra, everybody in this room knows about. Anybody does not know Cleopatra? Raise a hand. So everybody knows her. But somehow, this lady is not popular in Korea, Nefertiti. She's one of those Egyptian queens. And you can find this sculpture in Egyptian Museum in Berlin. Now, right next to this famous sculpture, there's another very interesting sculpture. So since you don't know the other one, Nefertiti, probably you also don't know this sculpture. Anybody by accident knows this sculpture? Even Professor Ruth Bernstein? Do you know this sculpture? Okay, so this sculpture is something called green color, right? So Berlin green head. It's so realistic, and very much three-dimensional. It looks like a modern art, modern sculpture. However, this was made almost 2,500 years ago in Egypt. 2,500 years ago in Egypt, they made this very three-dimensional, very realistic sculpture. Now, in Korea, in Asia, art. It's very nice art, painting. However, it's quite different from Berlin green head. Another art like this. You see, this is a very two-dimensional. It's very abstract. So this 3D versus 2D, why there is difference? I just gave you a couple of examples, but this trend is extremely strong. If you go all kinds of museums in Europe, you see this very realistic very three-dimensional arts. Even the painting is a three-dimensional perspective. In Asian art, somehow painting, even sculptures, somewhat two-dimensional, not very realistic, somewhat abstract. So why there is this big difference? Why there is this big difference? I think one possibility is evolution. Somehow in Europe, evolution worked better. In Asia, somehow evolution does not work that well. That's one possibility. But most people in this room doesn't want to believe that. I have my own theory. My theory is something to do with Chinese letters. So Chinese letter, invented more than 4,000 years ago. It's a pictogram. It starts with certain shape, mountain and horse, things like that. And so simplified and further simplified. The final product, sometimes you cannot tell what is the original concept. So somehow, this Chinese character, Chinese letter-based culture, people tend to like a rather abstract concept, like a metaphor, indirect expression. Compared with that, opposite meaning can be concrete, real, and direct, or straightforward. So my theory is somehow having this pictogram, Chinese letters, this Chinese letters is wonderful if you want to write a poem, literature. These Chinese letters are absolutely wonderful. You can have a beautiful poem with Chinese letters. However, this is not the best letters or best concept for science. I think that made a big difference. So what I'm trying to tell you is this: be multidimensional. Be multidimensional. View through multiple different angles. Try to have different views. Not indirect. Straightforward conversation. Straightforward communication. I think that's very much important to do science right. Okay, that's one topic I want to discuss in my presentation. Second message I want to convey. Second message is this. So this was some years ago. I just had my picture somewhere here. Compared with that picture, this is somewhat younger. So 2002, I had mostly black hair. Anyhow, I was in Moscow for the first time. 2002. You recognize who these people are. At least you recognize one of them, this fellow, right? Everybody knows about him, right? He's Lenin. So why I'm showing this? Because it's really interesting. There is something unique about Korea. If you go Europe, Russia is one example like this. If you go Europe, every corner of a street, you see certain statue, some people statue. America, same. If you go China, every university campus, I'm not sure about high schools, but at least university campus, you see some kind of statues. In fact, every building has their own statues. Very, very common. In Korea, it's very unique. Very hard to find any statues. I think the statues, there are two famous statues in Korea, 이순신 장군 and 세종 대왕. But they are ancient people. Extremely limited number of statues, modern figures, modern people. That's general tendency. But what I want to emphasize is not this general tendency. What I want to emphasize is statues for scientists. For scientists. So don't have a statue. So that means in Korea does not have heroes or heroines in science in Korea. There are no role models. There are no role models. However, I want to tell you this story. So if you ask this question, what created the 21st century? This is a list of items. Probably most of you will get some similar answer like this. Good fraction of this is due to something called CMOS. CMOS, probably most of you at least heard about this one, CMOS. The full name of CMOS is CMOS FET. CMOS FET. Complementary metal oxide semiconductor field effect transistor. That's what that stands for. FET is a field effect transistor. Anybody heard about FET among students? Please raise a hand. Among the students, FET, almost nobody. All our technology, new technology, most of devices we are using, we do use FET, field effect transistor. Field effect transistor is FET. Do you know who invented FET? The one we are using in smartphones and computers, we don't use a transistor, or original transistor. Original transistor was discovered in 1947. That's not the one we are using. The one you are using in all the Samsung devices, they are FETs, field effect transistor, not the standard transistor. Field effect transistor is quite different, very different. Who invented this one? Anybody knows? Our modern life depends on FET, and we don't know who invented the FET. Korea's economy, Samsung economy at least, also very much depends on flash memory, flash devices, these memory keys, flash memories. They are based on this FET, field effect transistor. It was invented by this fellow. He's a Korean. Kang Dae-won is the name. He should be truly important scientific figure in the whole world as well as in Korea. But he is very little known. So I want to introduce this man to you. He deserves much more than just one Nobel Prize. Much, much more. He just passed away too early. He passed away in 1990 when he was 60 years old. Too bad, he passed away just too early. Okay, so everybody in this room, remember this fellow. Our life, modern life depends on what he did in the 1960s. The last message I want to convey, I don't want to take too much time here. The last message, hopefully short presentation. In order to be successful, Professor Ruth Bernstein discussed a lot about how to be original as a scientist. But in general, I would say this, what you need is these three. Especially in science, to be successful in science, you need brain, you have to be smart, you need muscle skills, or you need good education. And then you need heart, motivation, something you really want to do. Which one do you think is most important? Throughout my professional career, about 30 years, I have watched very young people, high school student, college student, they grow up and then eventually they become professor and full professor, becoming famous. I have watched all those people. I just learned my personal experience. You may have your own opinion about this question, which one is more important. My opinion, it's very difficult to have all of these three. Very important one, most important one is heart. So be passionate. Passion is all about success, something you really want to do. That's very much important. Thank you very much.
궁금하신 부분 있으면 네, 이쪽 앞쪽에 손 들어주셨습니다.
이제 한국에서의 공부랑 그런 연구랑 살짝 거리가 동떨어져 있는 경우가 많은데, 그러니까 학교 공부랑 이제 연구랑은 좀 거리가 있잖아요. 그 배우는 범위라던가 사용하는 이론이라던가. 근데 현실적으로는 연구도 해야 되고, 하고 싶은 연구도 해야 되고, 그리고 이제 공부도 해야 되는데 학교 공부도 두 교수님들이시라면은 이제 어떤 선택을 하셨을지 둘 중에.
그러니까 고등학교 학생 입장에서,
네네네.
대학교 학생이 아니고 고등학교 학생 입장에서 정리를 하면은 고등학교 학생. Okay, so let me translate. Also, that's a question to you too, while you're listening. But so the question is, as a high school student, how much time the person has to spend for research, and how much time for just regular taking classes and doing regular study? What is the kind of right arrangement? I guess that's the question. That's a question to both of us. So my answer is, so at least the one I'm familiar with, American system. So high school students doing research during semester is during 학기 중에 연구를 한다는 건 참 힘들고, 주말에 뭐 집에서 이렇게 연구를 한다든지 그런 건 모르겠지만은 결국은 방학 때 그런 리서치를 포커싱을 해가지고 하는 게 그게 프랙티컬하고, 리서치라고 하는 것도 이게 시간이 참 많이 드는 거란 말이에요. 아까 우리 그 루트 번스틴 교수께서 이야기를 하셨지만은 우리가 실험을 하면, 우리 같이 전문가도 실험을 하면은 우리가 이제 우리 랩 같은 경우에는 실험을 하면은 19번 실험을 실패를 하면은 한 번이 될 가능성이 있다. 5% chance라고 우리가 보통 이야기를 해요. 우리 랩 같은 경우에, 아마 랩마다 많이 다를 거예요. 우리 랩 같으면은 어떤 아이디어를 가지고 트라이를 했을 때 95% failure, 5% chance. 우리 같이 전문적으로 연구하는 사람이 그런데 고등학교 학생 입장에서 연구를 해가지고 뭔가 아웃컴이 나오게 할 가능성이라고 그러는 것은 사실은 굉장히 낮은 거예요. 새로운 어떤 아웃컴이 나온다는 거. 언더스탠딩 하는 레벨의 어떤 리서치 결과가 나오는 것은 모르겠는데, 그런 의미에서 리서치 한다고 그러는 게 쉬운 게 아니고, 하려면은 포커싱을 해가지고 시간 투자를 많이 해야 되고 열심히 해야 되고 돈도 필요한 거고, 그러니까 그 방학을 이용해서 하는 게 그게 훨씬 더 효과적인 게 아니냐. 한꺼번에 학기 중에 한다고 그러는 건 참 힘든 게 아닌가 그런 생각이 들어요.
Yes, I would suggest that most of the research would happen probably during the vacations, as Dr. Chung said. And most of the programs, certainly that I know of, are set up that way. So, for example, my first research experience was volunteering in a laboratory during the summer. What I would suggest for the regular school year are doing things that are much simpler but build skills. So many of the Nobel Prize winners who I've talked to, certainly my experience was building like little kits where I made my own electric generator, just a little small one. I made my own spectroscope, ground some lenses for a telescope. things like that. These are not difficult, but when you come to studying the actual physics, or if you've done some simple chemical experiments with a chemistry set at home, things like that. I know you've been doing things where you're already working with phage and things. So when you learn about this now in school, these are not abstract concepts anymore. They're real things. You understand how to manipulate them. Lack of those skills is one of the things that I see as the biggest problem with the students we get. They have the book knowledge, but they don't understand how that translates into actually doing something. So my emphasis would be not so much on making a breakthrough or doing a fantastic experiment you could try to publish or something like that, but developing as much experience and skill as you can so that you understand at a practical level all the theoretical things that you're reading about. When you get into a laboratory, the other thing I would suggest is, because experiments fail so often, not to worry about whether the experiment is going to work. So I happen to have a mentor who was a wonderful man, and when I got into his laboratory, he said, I've got 3 projects. I've got one where we know exactly how to do it, we know exactly what to expect. It's basically a cookbook recipe, and it's easy to do. You can try that. We've got another project where we'd probably give it to a graduate student at some point, but it's not real important to do it right now. But if you want to try it, that would be great. If it doesn't work, we'll just give it to the graduate student a year or 2 from now when we get to it. But if it works, then we can move along a little faster. And then we've got a third project, which is totally crackpot. Somebody's just invented a new technique. Nobody's ever tried it. We don't know whether it'll work. But this is total cutting edge stuff. 99% probability of failure, but if you want to try it, go ahead. I chose the last one. It didn't work. It didn't make any difference whatsoever. I got to try and work with the cutting edge technology of that time, for the first time. That was the most exciting thing I ever did, even though it was a total failure. In fact, I had to spend 10 hours a day in a cold room at minus 20 degrees to carry this out in a huge, bulky, it was just crazy. But it was so much fun that that's what captured me into wanting to do research. That's what I think all of you should be thinking about at this point. You're in high school. The important thing is to get excited and find what you're passionate about. I don't know if you all know who Michael Jordan was. He was a basketball player, very famous in the United States, probably the best basketball player in decades. And at one point, somebody asked him, how do we make more great basketball players? What kind of training do we get them? How early do we identify them? How do we get them to work really hard? And he looked at him and he said, those are all the wrong questions. The right question is, how do we get them to love the game? If you want to become a great basketball player, you have to love basketball. If you want to become a great scientist, you have to love science. So that's what you need to think about, not making the breakthrough now. If you love science, eventually that will happen, but not if you think about it as that's all it's all about. I've got to make a breakthrough, I've got to make a breakthrough. That's what will actually drive you to distraction.
Thank you.
네, 감사합니다. 네, 또 궁금하신 점 있으신 분 있으시면 그 뒤쪽에 계신 학생분께서 손을 드셨습니다.
저도 마찬가지로 2분께 다 질문드리고 싶은데요. 그 과학 기술 중에서는 이제 윤리적으로 충돌하는 문제들이 있잖아요. 예를 들어서 제가 발표한 인공지능 같은 경우에도 어떤 사람은 뭐 터미네이터 같은 걸 생각하면서 이게 이제 사람을 해칠 수도 있다라고 생각을 할 수 있는데, 이제 예를 들어서 제가 자동차 공학자가 되고 싶은데 자동차 공학자의 자율주행 기술은 어떤 사람에게 있어서는 이게 안 좋게 인식이 될 수도 있잖아요. 그렇게 인식되는 사람들의 생각을 개선을 해야지 기술이 발전을 할 수 있는데, 그에 관해서 혹시 그런 문제에 직면한 적이 있고 그 문제를 어떻게 해결했는지 한번 질문을 드려보고 싶습니다.
That's a really tough question. So all knowledge is dangerous. I like to ask my medical students, who's the most dangerous person you will ever meet? And they all look at me like, you know, some military person or something. I said, no, it's a doctor. A doctor has more ways to kill you than anybody else, you know, you can imagine. We don't worry about it when we go to the doctor that he's going to kill us. Although every once in a while there's a bad doctor who does this. So one of the things that I try to emphasize to my students is that it's not the knowledge that we have that's dangerous in itself, it's how we decide to use it. And those are really two different kinds of problems. I worry about this myself. I work on autoimmune diseases. We don't know what causes them. I have a pretty good idea of what, for example, causes diabetes. I can actually make an animal get arthritis, things like that. I could do this to a person. In fact, I know for a fact that in Russia, they actually took something that causes multiple sclerosis and they weaponized it. If they wanted to drop a bomb on you, you might never even know that this material had been released because it would not cause disease until 3 months later. And then a whole bunch of people would start getting paralyzed for reasons you couldn't even fathom. That's what knowledge is like. And what we need to do in addition to all this research that we do is make sure that we raise citizens of humanity, citizens of the world, who understand that knowledge can be dangerous and that we should and must use it appropriately. I think it's a great question. It's a whole nother kind of education which we need to add on to the science education. I don't know the right way to do that. Maybe democracies are the way to do it. I don't know, but great question.
Okay, so we have enough time, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. 그 질문에 대해서 사실 직접적으로 대답할 그런 경험이라고 그럴까 그런 건 없는데 조금 다른 얘기를 내가 하고 싶은데 이제 우리가 그 사이언스를 하는 데 있어서 우리가 사이언스를 어떤 페임이나 명성이나 돈을 위해서 사이언스를 하면 큰일 나요. 돈이나 명성을 원하면은 뭐 사이언스에 드리는 그런 시간과 그 에포트를 가지고 다른 일을 해야지 사이언스를 하면 큰일 나요. 사이언스는 정말 사이언스를 러브 해가지고 화신이 있어가지고 사이언스를 해야지 다른 생각을 해가지고 사이언스를 하면은 사고치기 딱 십성이거든요. 무슨 말이냐면은 이제 예를 들면은 뭐 세계적으로 그런 트렌드가 있지만은 한국에서도 사이언스나 네이처에 페이퍼 하나 내는 것을 야단이 나잖아요. 응? 고등학생이니까지 잘 모르겠는데 대학생이 되고 대학원생이 되고 그 위의 과정을 쭉 거쳐가면은 페이퍼를 어디 네이처나 사이언스에 하나 냈다 그러면은 뭐 야단이 나요. 뉴스 미디어에서도 뭐 이름도 실리고 그리고 유명해질 수도 있어요. 그런데 그런 어떤 그 명성이나 돈을 위해서 사이언스는 할 게 전혀 못해요. 사이언스가 재밌어서 하는 거지. 사이언스 해가지고 돈 벌 생각하면은 은행이나 이쪽으로 나가야 되는 거고 명성을 얻으려면 글쎄 정치적으로 나가든지 그런 걸 해야지. 이제 제가 지금 러커스 대학교 있잖아요, 그렇죠? 근데 러커스 대학교 있기 전에 벨 연구소에 있었거든요. 고등학교 학생들은 아마 잘 모르겠는데 벨 연구소라고 그러는 게 최소한 그 수학이나 물리 중에서도 원자력 뭐 이런 거 빼놓고 그 아주 중요한 발견들이 벨랩에서 많이 됐죠. 뭐 이를테면 노벨상도 아마 원 인스티튜트로서 노벨상 가장 많이 받은 게 이제 벨랩이죠. 아마 10번 받은 거로 내가 기억하는데 그 벨랩에서도 큰 사고가 한 번 났어요. 그 사고가 난 게 뭐냐면은 여기 들은 적이 있을지 모르겠는데 그 핸드릭 쇼온이라고 하는 사람이 있어요. 핸드릭 쇼온이라는 사람이 그러니까 벨 연구소라고 그러는 게 옛날에는 아주 좋은 연구소였다가 그게 이제 AT&T라고 하는 회사 소속의 연구소인데 그 AT&T라고 그러는 게 여러 가지 그 사업이라고 하는 의미에서 여러 가지 문제가 많이 있어가지고 그리고 소위 말하는 그 모노폴리 뭐 이런 문제가 있어가지고 벨랩이 이제 거의 망하게 돼요. 2000년 초에 그 벨 연구소가 망하게 되는 단계에서 그 연구자가 정말 명성을 위해서 뭐 돈을 위해서 2년 동안에 인류 역사에 이런 적이 없어요. 2년 동안에 네이처하고 사이언스에 18편의 논문을 썼어요. 18편의 논문을 썼는데 다 가짜야. 다 가짜야. 그런 사건이 있고 나서 한 5년 정도 있다가 한국에서 비슷한 사건이 하나 있었잖아요. 다 아시다시피 물론 똑같은 그런 상황은 아니었는데 뭐 100% 다 가짜고 그런 건 아니었지만은 어쨌든 간에 아주 유사성이 있는 그런 사건이 벨랩에 있었던 건 2000년도, 2001년도 있었어요. 한국에 있었던 건 아마 2010년 정도로 기억하고 있는데 2010년 정도 좀 넘었는가요? 하여튼 그 정도로 기억하는데 이제 그런 경우도 보면은 벨랩 같은 경우에서는 벨랩이라는 게 망해가는 과정에서 뭔가를 서바이브를 하기 위해서 뭔가 살아남기 위해서 그런 단계에서 그런 사건이 일어났거든요. 예, 그러니까 내가 아까 얘기했듯이 조금 다른 지금 대답을 하는 건데 어쨌든 간에 강조를 하고 싶은 거는 사이언스를 하려면은 사이언스를 정말 좋아해서 사이언스를 하지 돈 벌기 위해서 명성을 위해서 사이언스를 한다고 그러는 거는 그건 참 잘못된 시각이고 그건 착각을 지금 하고 있는 거예요. 그러니까 사이언스는 진짜 뭐 이렇게 보면은 그 뉴턴이 하는 이야기가 있잖아요. 예? 뉴턴이 그 어린애들이 자기가 그 늙어 죽을 때까지 어린애들이 그 모래 비치에서 그 조약돌 그거 이렇게 주우면서 그 신기한 curiosity 그런 마음가짐을 정말 패스웨이 죽을 때까지 그런 마음을 가지고 그거를 좋아하는 그런 curiosity 그런 마음을 가지고 사이언스를 하는 거지 어떤 다른 생각을 해가지고 사이언스 하는 거는 that's a big mistake. 그거 하나는 강조를 해보고 싶어요.
네, 감사합니다.